Hello all, I'm Marin. Welcome to another reading vlog. This is going to be a nonfiction vlog, and I don't read a lot of nonfiction books for vlogs, but I felt like both of the books that I'm planning on reading in this video deserve their moment, if you will. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about them. Both of these books are on my April TBR, so I'm planning on getting this done over the course of a couple of days, but I have the books right here. You can tell I've started one of them already. So the first one that you will be seeing in this vlog is Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. This is by Emmanuel Acho, and this is based on like a video series that he was doing online and was published in 2020, I think right after the murder of George Floyd. So that's kind of the concept of this one. I'll talk more about this one in just a minute. And then the second book you will see in this vlog is One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This. This is by Omar El Akkad and is talking more about the atrocities that are being committed in Palestine. So this one will be in the second half of the vlog because we will be focusing on this one first. So let's go ahead and get into the vlog. So I am about halfway through this book right now. I am tabbing it. So I have decided to use 2 tabs for this one. I don't annotate very frequently, but I felt like both of these books kind of lended themselves to annotations quite nicely. So I have my little tabs right here. I am tabbing things that I think are important or are like food for thought, things that I kind of went, about, if you will. And then he lists a lot of things in this book that readers should check out if they want more information about. So the black/navy blue tab, because I think it's more navy blue now that I'm looking at it, is things that I might want to read in the future, or articles, books, assortment of things. So he mentions them quite frequently in here. So you can see I have been tabbing. I am also underlining, but this book is set up very interestingly. Basically, he took questions that he was getting asked frequently on his video series, and he's dedicated a chapter to each of those questions. So he starts off by putting the question and then the person's first name who asked the question, and then he spends the rest of the chapter kind of answering the question. So we have things like the name game, should you refer to them as Black or African American? We have something about implicit bias, so he's named that one, what do you see when you see me? That is kind of part of the you and me part. This is divided into 3 parts. So I am on part 2, which is us and them. So he is talking about things like systemic racism, the government, justice for some, as he calls it, and things like that. So I am currently on chapter 9, which is called The Fix. It's called Who's Governing the Government? And I'll just kind of give you an example. So here is like the question, and then he spends the rest of the chapter answering that question. So I'm really liking how easy this is to read. He's really basically, as the title would imply, holding a conversation with people. He's making it very easy to read. He's giving a lot of facts and bibliographies that you can go back and look things up and get further information on. And it's just easy to digest and read. So I'm really, really enjoying the way that this is written. I have not watched the video series. He does not do it anymore, I don't think, but I have not watched any of the video series. So this is kind of my only exposure to what he was talking about online. I might go back and check that out, but I feel like this kind of is covering a lot of what he covered in that video series. If you've watched it, correct me if I'm wrong. But yes, it's going well so far. Very easy to read, a very quick read, but it's definitely giving me a lot of things to think about. So you can kind of see I'm doing quite a bit of underlining and things like that. So yeah, it's going well. I definitely would recommend so far. I think it has been educational, and as I mentioned with the name of my tab, giving me a lot of food for thought. So I will let you know once I am finished with this book what my full ratings and things like that are, but so far so good. I am enjoying it, and I'm finding it very interesting and thought-provoking. Hello all, I have finished Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man by Emmanuel Acho, and as I suspected, I'm giving this 5 stars. So I did listen to the audio as I read this physically because he narrates the book, and I always like to listen to books that are narrated by their author because they're kind of read in the way that the author intended. Obviously, with a nonfiction book, it's a little bit different, but because this is based on a show or I guess video series that he did online, I felt like hearing his voice was kind of the best way to go about this. So I would highly recommend that. I thought the audio was very well done. This, as I already mentioned, is broken up based on questions that he was asked while he was sharing his video series. And this was a product of the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd and the protests and things like that that rose up from that. And this was kind of his way of dealing with that and trying to reach out to potential allies who would help with the cause. So that's kind of the setup for this. So I did tab a decent amount, as you can see, and I really enjoyed this. I felt like this was easily digestible. He broke down pretty complicated and hard-hitting topics into kind of bite-sized chunks so that they're easier to take in. He breaks up each of his chapters with the same taglines, if you will. So I'll just use this one as an example. He starts off with, you know, the title of that conversation. Usually he has some kind of quote or quotes. He's got the question that he was asked over here. And then when he breaks this down, he always has the same section. So he goes through a let's rewind, which is where he will give like historical context. There was obviously a lot of research that went into this book. I underlined and tabbed quite a few things that I want to look further into, things that I was not as familiar with. So after he gives kind of the historical context, then he has a section called Let's Get Uncomfortable, which obviously that is the title of this. And this is where he kind of doesn't pull any punches and talks to you and tells you precisely what he feels like you need to know. And then the last section is always called Talk It, Walk It. So it's ways that you as an ally can help with whatever the chapter was about. So as you can see, I did underline quite a few books to check out in this section. I have actually read Stamped by Ibram X. Kendi. That's one that was mentioned here. But yeah, I've really liked how accessible this book was, and I would highly recommend. I definitely want to go through and take where I put all of the blue tabs and kind of keep track or make a list, I guess, of everything he referenced. He also has a very good bibliography in the back, obviously, and he is just very well spoken. So this was very easy to read, even if the topics were difficult. The way that they were presented was done in a really good way. So I just really liked this. He does have at the back some recommendations, so other things that he would recommend you check out. I think all of them are mentioned in the book, but he includes a few other things. So yes, very much enjoyed this, would highly recommend, and I'm giving it 5 stars. So I'm very glad to have finally read this. The TBR kind of forced that upon me by giving me that highest rated prompt, and I'm really glad. So yes, this one is done. I actually finished this a couple days ago, but this was a winner. Now, I have started One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This, and this is another one that is narrated by the author. So the audiobook is available on Everand, and I am reading this. When I took the dust jacket off, the quote is actually right here. This was the quote that kind of inspired this whole book. And I am not quite halfway through, so I'm on chapter 5. So once I've hit the halfway mark, I will come and do my usual midway point check-in. I am planning on reading a bit more of this tonight and then finishing it potentially tomorrow. We'll kind of see how it goes, but here is where I am. So you can see I'm almost halfway. So unlike Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. This one does not have a bibliography, but there are a lot of things already that he has referenced that I am not that familiar with. So I've underlined them to kind of check out again in the future so that I can learn a little bit more about some of the things he's talking about. But anyway, that's enough of that. I will come back and chat with you at the midway point with my thoughts then. So let me go ahead and get back to reading, and I will see you then. Hello, it is time to do a reading update for One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This, and I have actually finished this. So I did not do a halfway point review because I read like the first chunk where I was, I don't know, like 40%, and so I figured I would just read a little bit more and then update you, and then instead I just finished the rest of it in one go. So we're just gonna do kind of final thoughts on this. This is definitely a 5-star book for me. I have seen a couple of people rate this a little bit more lowly because this is ultimately a memoir. This is a memoir about the author's life. He grew up moving from place to place to place, country to country to country, as his father looked for work. He was born in Egypt, so he is not Palestinian, but he is speaking about Palestine as a person of color and kind of his own personal life and the things that he has kind of faced as he has gone through his life. So that's kind of what this ultimately is. Interspersed in his memoir are some historical facts from Palestine, and just in general, he does a lot of talking about the US's view of Palestine and the government's inability or unwillingness to call what is happening in Palestine a genocide because they are such close allies with Israel and the fallout from that. So this book, I would assume, went to publication before the 2024 election happened, but there is a lot of foreshadowing in this book that made it quite clear that he and other people of color who were fed up with the government response to Palestine and the outcome that he felt that was going to have on the election, which ultimately came to pass. So there is quite a lot of quotes and things in here talking about how the Democratic Party kind of just stuck their head in the sand and weren't really to really face the issues that their party was having leading up to that election. And then, as we know, the ultimate result of that election and how he kind of saw it coming. So there were a couple of like really poignant quotes in here, things that kind of hit me kind of hard. So I'm going to share one of them. I have obviously quite a bit of tabs in this book. There were a couple things also that related back to some of the same things that were in this book, which I found very interesting. So let me kind of just pull a couple quotes out and I'll read them to you. So one of them is, this is the quote that reminded me very heavily of this, especially because one of the chapters in this one was titled The Angry Black Man. And he said, "I might not be able to keep from sounding like the angry Arab man every Arab man is secretly believed to be." So it just kind of shows that Black people, people of color, they all face the same issues, the same stereotypes, things like that. So I found that kind of very striking considering that I had just read Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. And then there were some other quotes about elections in general in the United States. So I'm going to kind of share some of those. It said, "Among the more troubling trends of 21st century American politics is the normalization of every election as the existential one, the one upon whose results rest the very survival of American democracy," which kind of struck me because that's definitely kind of the stance that Democrats took in the election. And ultimately that stance did not work. And it kind of really talks a lot about how the party as a whole is like unwilling to face some of the issues that the party has and their messaging and things like that. It says, every such story seems to prompt another round of argument about the folly of abandoning the Democratic Party now when so much is at stake. A writer friend of mine describes it as cutting off your nose to spite your face. It's a hackneyed phrase for a writer to rely on, but I can't stop thinking about it. The privilege implicit in its assumptions, ownership of body, agency over mutilation. Then it goes on to say, this stance boggles a particular kind of liberal mind because such a conception of political affairs applied with any regularity forces the establishment to stand for something. Basically saying that that was what the problem was with the Democratic platform in general, not just the presidential one, but other ones as well. They were not willing to take a hardline stance where one needed to be taken when it came to Palestine and other issues. And because of that, they lost voters. And ultimately, that is why the election had the outcome that it had. Now, as someone who voted for the Democratic option because the other one was just completely unthinkable to vote for, and in the US, you only have a two-party system, I can understand where people were coming from, but it also kind of enrages me, and I can't help but admit that because we are in a really terrible place now, but it is because of the fact that the Democratic Party has kind of just sat back on their heels and not been willing to truly address things that need to be addressed, in my opinion. So there's another one I'm going to try to find. This quote is the one that really kind of struck me. It said, "How empty does your message have to be for a deranged right wing to even have a chance of winning?" So again, it's just a lot looking at the election as a whole, and even though this was written prior to the outcome of that election, it was pretty clear that the general public didn't truly have their finger on the pulse of things, because I think the outcome of this election really did shock a lot of people. So I found this very interesting to kind of read, and a lot of things kind of gave me pause and things to think about as a white person in this country, and kind of resets your thinking a little bit, I guess. And the last quote that I'm going to kind of share is one that happened earlier in the book. So this was on page 59, but it said, this is kind of how people of color were viewing like the Democratic stance. It said, "Vote for the liberal though he harms you because the conservative will harm you more," starts to sound a lot like vote for the liberal though he harms you because the conservative might harm me too. So yeah, lots of food for thought in this. I definitely feel like this is very well written. I believe he's written like fictional books in the past. This is kind of the first nonfiction book. The one thing that I feel like is lacking from this are some actual statistics and a bibliography of sorts where he's getting some of his information for, because without kind of directly citing where you're getting this information, it's very easy for some people to be like, okay, it's not true because he's not telling us precisely where he's getting the info. So that's just kind of something that I want to throw out there. But ultimately, this is a 5-star for me. I feel like it's a very impactful read. I would highly recommend it, but you need to be ready for some uncomfortable truths, particularly when he is talking about the 2024 election, which at this point of being written was upcoming. And now we ultimately know the results of that and the fallout that we are suffering because of it. So just throwing that out there, I definitely would recommend. I think overall this one was a little bit more, as the title implies, conversational. It doesn't pull punches, but it's not as brutal as this one. So both very good nonfiction books. This one though is highly, highly researched with a bibliography, and I feel like that's lacking in this one. I would have liked to see that a little bit more in here as a nonfiction, but since this is ultimately a memoir, I guess we can give it a pass. So I am giving 5 stars. Obviously, you know, this one also got 5 stars. So overall, very, very well worth reading nonfiction books, but they are very different. So just kind of know that going in. This one is not going to be an accounting of Palestine as a whole. This is definitely more of a memoir with inclusions of what's happening in Palestine interspersed through the narrative. So ultimately, there you go. Those are the 2 nonfiction books that were on my April TBR. It is actually May, what day is it? May 3rd, but I finished this on the last day of April. So yes, I've kind of been sitting on this, kind of thinking about my thoughts, what I wanted to say. But yes, 5 stars, would recommend, but just know going in, this is not actually like a historical accounting of Palestine. This is a memoir. If you're looking for kind of a historical accounting of Palestine, this one would be a good place to start. So this one is written by Ilan Pappé. I read it last year. Very difficult to read, but this is going to give you the historical context if you are looking more for that rather than this one, which is memoir. So just throwing that out there. But yes, that's going to be the end of this vlog. I know that these vlogs have kind of been just me talking just about the books. I'm going to get back into doing like the B-roll footage and stuff like that when I have a little bit more free time. I'm looking forward to the summer because I have a vlog series planned that I think is going to be a lot of fun, so you can stay tuned for that. There will be a couple more vlogs coming this month, but ultimately that is going to close out this vlog. So I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave me a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to my channel if you would like to see more from me. If you made it to the end of this video and would like to leave me an emoji to show that you were here, why don't you go ahead and show me the Palestinian flag in the comments, and I will see you in my next video. Bye everyone.